It's moving left to right now.
No, it's moving right at us.
Sierra, point the Sony at it. Actually get good shots with the Sony.
Okay, let's go. Let's drive.
Sierra, shoot that building blowing up.
Let's drive. Let's drive. Let's just drive, man.
Just
Jordan,
trust me. We got about 10 minutes to shoot that.
Jordan,
Sierra.
just drive.
Zoom in on that,
Jordan,
Sierra.
drive. Jordan, come on. Jordan, let's go.
Be quiet.
No,
Shoot!
fucking shoot it. Jordan, let's go, man, please.
Sierra, fire that at the fucking tornado. Please.
Jordan, let's go,
We're
man.
moving.
Now.
Go.
Now.
Oh, Jordan.
It's moving.
Jordan, what?
Again, large tornado confirmed on the ground, moving north just south of Sulphur.
Yeah, I believe they said there was another tornado in Doherty headed north. There's several structures in Sulphur down as well. Hey, just be advised, all of downtown Sulphur is destroyed.
Springtime in Oklahoma, the perfect place and time for killer tornadoes. The 2024 tornado season here has been epic. About 100 twisters have touched down, leaving behind death, destruction, and wrecked communities. Welcome to Sulphur, a once thriving city of about 5,000 in south central Oklahoma. It was a historic place lined with quaint shops and century-old buildings. Chandra Raymer is the president of the Sulphur Chamber of Commerce. She walked me through the heart of this community, now mostly debris.
On a typical Monday, what would have been happening here?
Oh, it would have been popping.
Yeah.
Lots of visitors, tourists. It was just the place to be.
Sulphur got its name from its many mineral springs. Tourists flocked here by the millions to enjoy them in the Chickasaw National Recreation Area. All those visitors were good for business.
This was a new boutique, Prairie Thicket. The Chamber of Commerce had just done a grand opening on Friday,
When was the tornado?
Saturday.
Oh, God.
So we were still getting new businesses downtown because we were thriving, the best we'd been in years. And here we are today.
My name is Juliette Kayyem. I am a professor and author who spends a lot of time walking in the wake of disasters, looking to find better ways for people to withstand them.
I'm Miles O'Brien. I'm a science correspondent for PBS. Over the years, I too have spent a lot of time trying to understand why it all happens and what researchers can do to make us safer. Juliette and I met in Norman, Oklahoma, home of the National Weather Center. No place in the world knows more about severe weather. So I love where we are right now. Here we are at the National Weather Service site, the Flying Cow Cafe, famous for the original Twister movie and the famous single line of a movie.
Cow.
Which I love. And it's good that they have a sense of humor here.
Yes,
I
I mean,
like
they
that.
do.
Yeah.
Being here, you get a sense that they understand the danger and they sort of need to laugh about it because it's so persistent.
You had the opportunity, I know, to be in Sulphur as they're really just still reeling and trying to, literally pick up the pieces.
They're in shock and they're grieving, and if they've lost life, it is a disaster of epic proportions.
Yeah, so this was the night of April 27th. It was a really weird day.
I'm with Matthew Capucci, the senior meteorologist for My Radar.
The atmosphere was so volatile, really favored rotating storms, and yet very little happened during the daytime. And then at night, 9, 10 o'clock, things just went gangbusters.
He described the intense weather system that changed Sulphur forever.
There was a cold front. That was the main trigger for storms. There was warm air rushing northwards ahead of the cold front, and there's a little band of gathering air. And that band of gathering warm air caused a line of rotating supercell thunderstorms to develop, and just had one after another work north.
The storm system caused a large, deadly tornado outbreak. The twister that hit here was classified as an EF3, meaning the winds were between 136 and 165 miles per hour. One person died when the bar that stood here collapsed.
Tornado touched down just southwest of Sulphur, and it was only on the ground for about 10 miles, had a 13-minute lifespan, but its peak ferocity was right in downtown Sulphur.
A tornado isn't just fast. Its path is also indiscriminate and often narrow. One street can be entirely decimated, while just a few feet away, another is spared.
The pathway is so narrow and tight. Literally, if I were 30 feet that way, I'm totally fine.
Yep. It's like the world's biggest lawnmower has come through.
Chandra Raymer is a proud, lifelong resident. She and this community have never experienced anything like this.
It took out businesses that have been here since the 1920s and before, 100-year-old buildings, so it's definitely been a devastating blow.
How many businesses were impacted by the tornado?
About 70.
Out of how
70.
many?
We would be lucky to probably have just a little over 100, 120 businesses total. We couldn't wrap our minds around the destruction. It is overwhelming. I can drive through town 10 times a day, and each time my heart breaks in a little different way.
The Sulphur tornado plowed through downtown, but didn't stop there. It traveled to the northeast for 3 miles, straight toward the home of Mark and Kathy Walk. I met them on the spot where their house once stood.
I mean, the tornado come through here and just wiped it all out and strung it all through the acres to the north and east and west.
They raised a family here in a big brick house on a hill with their dogs and cows and sheep. Like so many others, they had little time that night. Mark got to the storm shelter without a moment to spare.
We go over there and get in the cellar. I shut the door.
And he turned and he sat down.
Started hearing, I thought it was hail hitting the metal door.
And it was just like a tink, and then this god-awful noise.
And then we heard a
and then this cloud filled in the cellar, and
then we heard just a big then it was crystal quiet.
Did it cross your mind that you lost the house? I mean, was that in the realm?
Knew something happened, didn't know what, and then I wanted to get out and see. Yeah. And I tried to get out the door, and I couldn't get out the door. And I guess the debris had pushed it down, so I finally beat it and got it up. Well, I took a flashlight, and I'm looking at the house, and I'm like, they're like, what is it? I said, it's gone. It's bad. I mean, your mind just goes in so many different directions. I mean, you're thinking. But, I mean, I don't know what to do.
They lost so much. Almost everything, papers and photo albums, remnants of a life. Even Kathy's wedding ring.
But that's okay. That's okay. I have them. All that could be replaced at a later time.
Yeah, that's right.
The grace of God is all it was.
Yeah.
That I can wake up every day and see my husband and my youngest still. Because otherwise I'd have been standing right there where it came through the house.
Oh my God.
I'm sorry.
No, I mean, we come here and make you dredge it out, so it's okay.
Their neighbors, friends, and their church have all rallied to help them. They're settled as best as they can be in a trailer for now, still picking up the pieces and trying to figure out how to put it all back together. They are ready to rebuild.
I mean, just an amazing couple. I think the thing that struck me is it was barely a blink between the time Mark is watching TV with his daughter and when their lives are at risk.
Yeah, I think a lot of what ifs, a lot of, it's good things fell into place for them. And that's weird to say because their home was completely scraped off its foundation. And yet, obviously they're grateful all to be alive and moving forward.
The Federal Emergency Management Agency also arrived in Sulphur, hoping to help everyone move forward. Brian McDaniel is the Emergency Management Director for Murray County. As fate would have it, the disaster he is managing is the first in the nation for a new set of FEMA procedures.
They actually made them a little bit better. They had to have just-in-time training and some updates on what the new rules and regulations were.
Right.
So it complicated the response, the cleanup, and it has continued to make a little bit of that difficult.
Most people think FEMA foots the whole bill for cleanup, but that is not the case. It will pay 75% of the cost. The city must pay the rest.
But, financially, whether the city of Sulphur can afford this whole thing, their portion of that will be in the millions of dollars as well. And I don't know of many small towns that have the ability to do that.
Right after the storm hit, there was a huge outpouring of support for Sulphur. I met Brian in a warehouse amid some of the donations. All of them came with good intentions, but it actually added to their challenges.
And thankfully, we had a great community that stepped up and helped us manage that. And it's really overwhelming to see that. They just showed up and out here, what can I do? How can I help?
Gratifying as it is, the outpouring of help doesn't sync up well with the ongoing need.
I feel like in the first week, 2 weeks probably, the cavalry comes to town. Everyone comes in. Great intentions. I mean, we had people walk through the door and say, I have a backhoe and a track hoe and a dozer loaded up, ready to go, put me to work. Well, we didn't know where to send them at that time.
And today, now that they are ready for the help, the people, the backhoes, and the dozers have evaporated.
Does it feel like you could get abandoned? You could get left alone in this recovery?
Everyone kept saying, we need people to come back later. Tell them to come back in a few weeks or a few months, and they get busy back with their own personal lives, and we understand that. But if you take a look around Sulphur, we still have people struggling.
Yeah. I keep thinking about time. Like, it's just this idea of, of how short it is in terms of a recognition that there is a danger and the possibility that you're dead.
Basically, you've got 15 minutes at best.
Yeah.
It's not a lot of time if you think about it. And researchers here are doing what they can to give a little more time to people, and it's not an easy task. But that is the mission here at the National Weather Center.
We are the capital of the world for severe weather here in Norman, Oklahoma. This is the Super Bowl. Some of the best forecasters and meteorologists sit in this particular building.
Research meteorologist Danae Carlis is the director of the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration's National Severe Storms Laboratory. Here, scientists and engineers are developing new forecasting techniques and technology.
We really are a test bed for that. This facility, there's nothing else like it in the world.
For 34 years, meteorologist Harold Brooks has been developing new tools and techniques to buy these forecasters more time. Tornadoes are hard to study, aren't they?
Things happen so quickly and over such a small space and time scale, it's really hard to figure out what's going on without collecting a lot of data from a lot of different cases to try to put things together.
But Harold and the others here have put together a pretty clear picture of what's going on.
Big time event. You have winds blowing from the equator at low levels that's bringing air out from over the Gulf of Mexico, which is a wonderful source of warm, moist air.
Meanwhile, the prevailing westerly winds at high altitudes bring cold, dry air from the Rocky Mountains and the desert Southwest.
And you put that above the warm, moist air. When we have the winds right, we're bringing the ingredients together in the middle of the part of the country.
When the warm, moist air near the surface starts rising through those shifting, accelerating winds into colder, drier air, it starts spinning like a football.
Eventually, it all comes back to the fact that the winds change direction. The winds increase with height in the environment the storm forms in, and typically change direction with height as they come in.
It is more likely to happen in the spring here because that's when the temperature difference between the warm, moist air near the surface and the cool, dry air at altitude is greatest. So what about tornadoes and climate change?
Is it possible yet to connect those dots?
No, we really can't connect any changes in tornado occurrence with climate change.
Remember, it's all about the temperature difference between the warm air below and the cold air above. And the climate is warming faster at the poles than it is closer to the equator.
So if the pole warms more than other parts, that will decrease. And so that would be less favorable for tornadoes to form.
But the overall number of potentially damaging tornadoes, EF1 or stronger, has remained constant, about 500 a year. The only difference now, they are happening more often in clusters.
When we think about the ingredients for storms, some of them we expect to become more favorable as we go into the future and stronger. Others we expect to become less favorable. And so we run on a knife edge as to which dominates.
Harold is a volleyball referee. So he will, try to figure out where that sweet spot is between overcalling and undercalling. And he said it's precisely the same dilemma for weather forecasters who are trying to issue these warnings, because if they overcall, people will ignore and get bad. If they undercall and something bad happens, it's on them.
I mean, look, we went into tornado shelters that are not comfortable. You don't want to spend a lot of time in there. Right. If you keep throwing people down there because of false alarms, they will stop going.
This is why meteorologists and weather experts are beginning to focus on how best to communicate the risks to people in danger.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm Juliet.
Kenzie, how are you doing?
I met Kenzie Krochak at her home in Norman.
Hi, Matt. How are you? Well, thank you. I'm a meteorologist. I study tornadoes. I know what to do in a tornado warning.
Her goal is to make sure everyone does. She is on the social science team at NSSL. Meteorology meets psychology.
I would say maybe the last 10 to 20 years is when we've really started to recognize the importance of how humans interact with weather information.
So it's not just like, okay, the clouds are doing this or the rain is doing that. It is how are people responding, absorbing, listening. Yeah.
So I think what's really important is that, as scientists, we are communicating our information in a way that is relevant and applicable to people's lives.
Meeting people where they are, communicating clearly, and understanding human nature. This all seems so obvious, but it isn't simple. A tornado watch is issued 4 to 6 hours before anything might or might not happen.
So do we expect people to just go sit in their shelter for 4 hours? Like, it's really hot down there. We don't want to do that.
A tornado warning, on the other hand, is much more urgent. You might have 15 minutes or maybe just a few to take action.
And so there's sort of this gap in between the watch and the warning. There isn't sort of a middle ground. And so we're trying to figure out what types of information would be most helpful for people in that sort of between space.
And how best to reach them? People are receiving information in all kinds of ways that were unimaginable even a few years ago. Social media and streaming pose new challenges, and maybe opportunities for forecasters.
And so we're really trying to understand how meteorologists can be on lots of platforms at once. It's certainly not making the job easier, but I think it's really important to recognize that.
TV stations in Oklahoma have gotten the multi-platform message. They now put a QR code on screen during tornado outbreaks. Viewers can switch to a live stream of the broadcast on their phones while heading to their shelters. About those shelters, that's a subject near and dear to this household. Kenzie's husband, Matt Flournoy, is also a severe storm researcher at NSSL. So when they got married, they knew what their perfect wedding gift would be.
Like, we know there's a tornado warning, and so we come out here and we open the storm shelter.
So pretty easy.
Yeah. We've practiced it a few times, I will say. Yeah.
A storm shelter.
Part is getting down into it, especially when you're carrying a cat carrier.
It may not seem very romantic, but it does encourage them to stay close, literally.
This is really fun for someone who hates enclosed spaces, but here we go, I'm ready.
Their retreat is part of a well-imagined and practiced plan.
So when we come down here, we usually have a couple go bags packed. So we'll both have a backpack. You know, we'll put our laptops, our iPads, a jump drive of all of our wedding pictures, some just personal things that would be harder to replace. And then actually in about late March, usually, we will put our safe with all of our important documents just literally down in here. And it stays here for the 2 or 3 months that tornadoes usually happen.
I'm not surprised that this couple is ready. It is their job to think about this. Too many ignored their example to stay safe and in touch, whether it's via TV, phone alerts, social media, apps like MyRadar, weather radio, or a siren.
But make sure you have more than one, because if one fails, you want to have a backup, and better yet, you want to have a backup to the backup.
Really was taken with this idea of the social science meteorologist, right? This the scientists can know everything or a lot, but if people aren't receiving it, in her words, where they are, right? If we got to meet people where they are, then it won't help people.
When it comes to predicting these things happening, technology has come a long way, but if you think about it, it's still a little bit of a crapshoot, right? They can predict like a polygon of concern, but an individual tornado, that's so chaotic. I don't know that we'll ever be able to do that. But the explosion of cloud-based compute power is enabling big improvements in forecasting. The cloud is helping researchers understand the clouds. Is that really changing your business in a fundamental way?
It's changing it in a really good way.
Meteorologist Pam Heinzelman is the director of the Forecast Research and Development Division.
And so on the cloud, we have our whole system end to end. It's very fast, it's very efficient, and it makes things really easy to run, and it's relatively cheap as well.
She and her team are leveraging that compute power to create what they call a warn-on forecast. The goal is to improve the lead time and reliability of warnings for severe thunderstorms, tornadoes, and other hazardous weather events. They're running an ensemble of weather models simultaneously. Each begins with slightly different data, an effort to account for the uncertainties.
You bring those together, essentially data mine them using machine learning approaches, and then you're able to produce a forecast that is calibrated and has decent reliability, out to a certain period of time.
Right now, the Weather Service can provide about 15 minutes warning of a tornado. With all the things you're doing and are, plan to do, is that going to change appreciably?
I believe with the forecasters using that system could probably produce a warning out to an hour.
The push to improve forecast models, the software, comes as researchers here test some new hardware. Electronics engineer Daniel Wasilewski gave me a glimpse of an experimental weather radar. It's called Phased Array.
This is the antenna of our phased array radar called the Advanced Technology Demonstrator. With a phased array radar,
We can scan the sky electronically with no moving parts.
Instead of one spinning antenna, it has an array of more than 4,800 antennas, each capable of transmitting and receiving signals independently.
By varying the timing of when we send signals out of each small antenna, we can focus the beam straight ahead, to the left, to the right, up. We don't have to follow any particular sequence. And through that, we have much faster scanning and much more flexible scanning.
The current fleet of Doppler radars, called WSR-88Ds, was developed in the 1990s. It requires 4 to 5 minutes to scan the sky from top to bottom. A phased array can do the same job in 60 to 90 seconds.
If I know I got minute by minute by minute by minute data from the phased array technology, I'm gonna be able to issue my warning much quicker. Minutes matter. Those minutes are gonna pay a huge dividend in your ability to protect your family.
There's a whole cadre of people out there that chase these storms and try to get as close as they can, as close as they dare.
Having seen what a tornado can do now to a city and a house and a community, the idea of running to it seems crazy, but also important, because I think we learn a lot.
Some of it is for science, and some of it is to get pictures. So Jordan, how do you know where to go? Yeah, I mean, they are storm chasers, and I met one in Norman.
Is that the idea?
Yeah, so I'll look at forecast models, HRRR in particular, and then I'll look at surface models as well.
Jordan Hall is a man on a mission.
My goal is to shoot close range, insane video and sell it to the news networks.
With great success, he captures amazing videos for MyRadar.
You're good, you're good. More, bro, we gotta go. We're good, we're good. We're not good, let's go. Stay still, stay still, we're fine. I hear the roar.
Do all you storm chasers get along, or are you competitive?
Very competitive.
Yeah.
It's a very competitive game.
I sat in his tricked-out SUV and watched highlights of this epic storm chasing season.
This year has been absolutely bonkers since middle of April. Basically been nonstop. This was the first, one of the first few tornadoes I saw in this car.
Right in front of us.
Oh, wow, 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 whoa, whoa.
Yep.
Whoa. This transformer's going, you were very close to that, my friend.
And then here in a minute, it's gonna pipe out right here.
Holy cow.
That's a strong tornado. That's a violent tornado.
Is it less risky than it would seem? Put it that way.
I would say so. Getting close to these storms always has its dangers.
That a boy, Jordan. Right there, stop. We're good. Jordan, stop. We're good, we're good.
But the biggest risk I think we all face out there is just driving the countless miles that we do and being on the road so much.
They're vying for precious asphalt near killer storms with a fleet of vehicles carrying state-of-the-art sensors and top scientists working for the National Severe Storms Laboratory. Okay, so what are we looking at here?
So these are the mobile Doppler radars.
That's where I met veteran research meteorologist Eric Rasmussen, chief of the Field Observing Forecast Support Group.
These two on the outside are really suited best for seeing the whole storm, and they're kind of less nimble.
Doppler radar can detect precipitation and, by measuring the shifts in frequency, track the speed and direction of wind within storms. It's hard to think of a more significant breakthrough in severe storm forecasting technology. And putting Doppler radars on wheels has dramatically improved scientists' understanding of tornadoes.
We scan back and forth across the storm like this, and then lift the dish up a little ways, do it again and over, get a kind of a three-dimensional picture of the thunderstorm.
They also have a vehicle outfitted with a mobile Doppler LiDAR, which emits pulses of light instead of radio waves. It is more precise than radar.
Somewhere between like 3 and 10 times more detail We like the nimbleness too, because now you're working with a full-size pickup truck instead of a behemoth. And so this can maneuver and find parking places a whole lot more easily.
The goal is to park these vehicles near a tornado as it is touching down. No small feat.
We have to get close. The roads aren't very forgiving, and so you have to be able to really maneuver.
In the early days, researchers didn't have many tools in their toolbox, and so they relied on 16mm film. The technique is called photogrammetry. Eric showed me how it is used to determine the wind speed of a tornado.
If you watch here in a second, this tornado is going to hit a construction site and lift all sorts of sheets of plywood and that sort of thing in the air. Here we have hundreds of pieces of debris that could be tracked.
So would you go through like frame by frame with, and track individual pieces of debris?
That's right,
in all directions?
And once you lose track of that piece of debris, you back the film up and start with another piece of debris and end up with these hundreds of points of data. And then you go back, measure those motions of the markings, and then enter the data onto punch cards and do some math and come up with how strong the wind was that was pushing that debris along.
Talk about laborious, right?
Laborious. I mean, you know, hundreds and hundreds of hours of tracking on a short movie segment.
The technique was pioneered by the legendary meteorologist Ted Fujita, who used it to create the famous scale that grades the intensity of tornadoes. Technology like Doppler radar and LiDAR may have made photogrammetry obsolete. But they have not answered all the questions, including a crucial one. What are the wind speeds right at the surface?
That bottom 50 or so feet is so complex. We don't have any idea what's going on down there.
Is it possible there's way more wind going on down there than we've ever registered as far as the speed? Is that what you're thinking?
I'm thinking the wind speeds are probably stronger than we would have guessed, and I'm thinking they're a lot more chaotic. What a building is experiencing is probably quite different than what we have imagined it would experience. I suspect it's going to be a lot more interesting than we would have assumed.
To solve that mystery, he and his team will have to devise new sensors and techniques. He's thinking Doppler drones might be the future.
As Miles learned of the technological innovations that might help us understand the funnel better, I walked through the sulfur ruins with Chandra Raymer, and it became frustratingly clear that it isn't technology that will bring its main street back.
This was our plaza.
And what would happen here?
Well, sock hops for the high school, pep rallies, Saturday night at the movies for families to come out and bring your lawn chairs, but also the Rotary Car Show, the Kiwanis Barbecue Cook-Off. Christmas was amazing in this little area.
It was 2 months after the storm when I paid my visit. I was struck by the amount of debris that remained. Things moved so fast when the tornado struck, but not now.
There's still a lot of debris around. Is that just because it's so hard to pay for or find people, or?
People are getting estimates for $80,000 for debris removal.
Yeah.
They may have a $150,000 policy on their building. Someone reached out to me yesterday and said, I have a home that needs to be demolished and the debris removed, and I don't have the money to do that.
How are you doing? It's got to be a lot.
It's a lot. It's overwhelming at times. Sometimes I feel very inadequate because I still have people reaching out to me.
2 months later, looking around and aren't really seeing the cavalry anymore. They are left alone, and the state is there to help. The federal government is there to help, but it's not as organized. It's complicated. There's no real agenda. And so different communities respond in different ways. We don't know how sulfur was going to respond. We know how Moore responded. They say lightning doesn't strike twice. But there's more to that story here in Moore. It's a bedroom community of more than 60,000, sandwiched between Oklahoma City and Norman. It is ground zero in Tornado Alley. The most powerful tornadoes have plowed through the city again and again. The darkest day came on May 20th, 2013.
It was one of those days where, in late May in Oklahoma, everybody holds their breath.
My radar senior meteorologist, Matthew Capucci, told me how the storm formed.
You had a low-pressure system in South Dakota, a cold front snaking down from Kansas City to near Wichita Falls, so just west of Oklahoma City. Around 1:45, 2 o'clock, a little bit west of Moore, you had a storm crop up. And within 2 or 3 minutes, it went from a little cone to a massive, violent tornado, a quarter to half mile wide. And then it just beelined towards Moore, right around 3:15, 3:20.
The National Weather Service declared a rare tornado emergency, invoked in only the most dire scenarios.
Large, extremely dangerous tornado. If you're not underground, you could be killed.
And what was it in the end?
It was an EF5 with 210 mile per hour winds. This tornado was actually the last EF5 anywhere in the world. We haven't had one since.
It was headed east-northeast through the heart of the city, straight toward the Plaza Towers Elementary School.
We had about 16 minutes to prepare for what was headed our way.
Robert Romines is the superintendent of the Moore Public Schools. He was second in command that fateful day.
The initial reaction was, we're used to dealing with tornadoes in this area, and not during the day, however, and so that was new for us.
They didn't have a safe room, but there was a plan. Teachers and principals followed it.
Students were all huddled in a line against the wall with their heads covered, crisscross applesauce, facing the wall.
Facing the wall.
Yes, and so, but when the wall collapsed, it crushed them.
The main entrance offers a daily, devastating reminder of the 7 lives cut so short. 3rd graders, their passions etched in stone.
That was really, really important to me and others, that our 7 would not ever be forgotten, and they won't. I mean, as long as this building stands.
Why would you build back here? That's got to be, hard.
This school is the heart of this community. And families were hell-bent, sorry, but they were hell-bent on rebuilding right here. This was their home.
The new building is tornado-ready.
So this is it, right? You would just pass by it and have no idea.
I have no idea, except there's features that I'll point out.
Robert walked me down what seemed like just another corridor. But it is basically a bunker hidden inside the school. The entire student body of more than 500 can safely shelter here.
So when students are in here, this set of doors close, this set of doors close, and you can see the thickness of the walls at the door jambs. I mean, you're talking about 24 to 36 inches of concrete and steel. And so that's what's around this entire perimeter of this building. And then, of course, the ceiling, which you can't see, is the same thing.
Here in Moore, they are all about building back better. I met the assistant city manager, Deidre Ebry, near Interstate 35, which bisects the city. We stood in front of a bank that was leveled in 2013. A piece of the vault that sheltered and saved 23 people is the only hint of what happened here. Business is booming. The city is thriving.
So it's back, but better?
Back, but better.
And
Absolutely.
stronger?
Stronger structurally and stronger emotionally. I think that people have a sense of we've been there, we've done that, we learned, and we are not panicked so much as we are prepared for what could come, and it can come again, and we know that.
Prepared but not panicked. That's the vibe nearby at Van's Pig Stand. The old restaurant was demolished in 2013. Owner Nina Schumann's daughter was in charge that afternoon.
Samantha was okay. Her and the other manager that were in the store rode out the storm in the bathroom, the only part of the building that was left standing.
This opened a year later?
Yes.
In 2012? How did you do that?
So we knew we were going to rebuild that. I mean, that was our livelihood. I mean, this was it. This is our income.
Beneath the porch in front of the new restaurant, there's a storm shelter big enough to hold a full house.
And that was an absolute must after the tornado. If we'd have built this before the tornado, we probably wouldn't have done that. But, you know.
You don't have to learn that lesson again.
No.
Yeah.
No.
And you were lucky.
We don't want to ever forget what happened, but we're resilient, and here we are.
And there we were. And the barbecue smelled pretty good. So Deidre and I sat down to sample some fine brisket, all in the name of research. She told me how Moore didn't waste this crisis. It passed a new residential building code designed to protect homes against the wind.
How did it impact sort of the way people thought about Moore?
Well, honestly, it was very positive. It was very well received, and timing was of the essence, because really you're playing on the emotion that's still there, and the sense of we have to do something, and why would we sit here and allow this opportunity to pass us by when we do have the will to do it.
And yet, no other city in Oklahoma has followed suit. Safety can still be a tough sell, but it isn't rocket science.
You must be Lou. Thank you
Hi,
for meeting me.
Juliet. Welcome.
Nice to see you.
Good to see you too.
So
Thanks
this
for
is
coming
it.
out. This is it.
Before I left for Oklahoma, I stopped by the FM Natural Hazards Lab in Rhode Island. Lou Gritzo is the chief science officer. Here, they conduct all kinds of stress tests on building materials and designs.
One of the most important things about tornadoes is they produce a lot of debris, and that flying debris can do a ton of damage. So if we look at like an EF1 tornado at about 100 miles an hour, it produces pieces of people's homes, like a 2x4, at 35 miles an hour.
And that can kill.
So that can produce a lot of damage, and once that damage happens on the outside of the building, the wind gets in and can destroy the building a lot faster. So we're going to now...
He fired a 2x4 at a wall sheathed with one layer of half-inch plywood.
We have a backstop here.
Yeah.
And otherwise, that 2x4 would have just kept going right in and done even more damage.
But with 2 sheets, 1 inch total, the 2x4 loses the contest.
That's the ideal outcome.
I was going to say, I wasn't ready for that. I know you told me, but I was not ready for that.
If it can protect against something flying in a storm like this, we can keep the envelope of that structure intact, and that's really the name of the game for tornadoes. You don't want the wind getting inside the structure. That's when it starts to fly apart.
A lot of little things can add up to a big improvement in storm safety. Back in Moore, builder Marvin Hayworth showed me how their building code makes a home more firmly connected. The walls are bolted to the foundation, and so are the garage doors, the Achilles heel of any home.
The tornado doesn't take the whole house, it takes it piece by piece. And if you can stop it from taking the garage door, it's going to be much more difficult for the winds to get inside the garage and start taking the rest of the house apart.
Sheathing is attached with a lot more nails, ring shanks with ridges.
Ring shank's very hard to pull out. Even if you try to pull them out with a hammer, it's very difficult to pull them out.
And the roof trusses are attached with metal plates called hurricane straps, mandated in Florida in the wake of Hurricane Andrew.
But they're good for tornadoes.
They're good for tornadoes, good for any kind of high wind.
Yeah. And those are required now?
Those are required all the way around the perimeter of the house.
All of this adds only $2 per square foot in cost. For this home, that would amount to $6,000, less than 2% of the asking price.
Now, looking back just from your perch 11 years later, was this a wise move on the part of Moore?
As a home builder, I had concerns about the buying public accepting that cost. And it really, I had a lot of concern about it, whether or not they would accept it. But they have accepted it, and it's not a point of discussion anymore. It's just, this is the code, this is the way we build in Moore, and this is the way we're going to build.
It's a little bit stunning to me that this is the only community that has decided this is the right thing to do.
One thing to remember is most tornadoes are EF1s. They're survivable, and buildings can withstand that. And if you can protect the building, you can protect more people. It's so simple.
And you know, that idea that, you know, never waste a good crisis, they're actually in this rubble is an opportunity for sulfur, isn't there?
It will be a huge struggle to build back this old main street with early 20th century charm and 21st century resilience.
You know, the citizens here might demand more in terms of how things are built. What would that look like?
We really want it to look like old Salford looked.
Yeah.
Obviously, you know, we're gonna have to do lots of remodeling and renovations, but we loved what we had. Safer sulfur, yes, that would be great.
Safer sulfur. The goal is shared at the Capitol in Oklahoma City. I went to the State Emergency Operations Center and met Annie Vest, the director of the Department of Emergency Management.
Right now, we're navigating something that's more complicated than any of us have dealt with in this state when it comes to downtown Sulphur. It is a remarkable loss to lose Main Street in a rural community. If we rush to recover, we don't rebuild appropriately. And we don't want to ever see that happen. We want them to make good generational investments because that's what they now have an interesting opportunity to do.
The rush to recovery, the desire to just move forward can frustrate long-term planning. But amid the wreckage and the heartbreak, there is an opportunity for Sulphur to rebuild better than before.
We have hope, and we can see the light at the end of the tunnel. We can rebuild. We'll rise from this.